The diamond on her finger was worth more than the restaurant they were sitting in, but the most valuable thing in the room that night wasn't the jewel. It was a secret. Billionaire Arthur Finch believed he was dining with his future wife, the enchanting Serafina Monet. He was wrong. He was dining with a predator, and he was the prey. The only person who knew the truth was the one person no one ever notices, the waitress. In a world of glittering facades and calculated lies, a single, whispered warning was about to ignite a firestorm, exposing a conspiracy so vast it would shatter an empire. The light in the Crimson Sparrow was a curated illusion. Dripping from crystal chandeliers like liquid honey, it pooled on starched white tablecloths and glinted off silver. A light designed to make everyone look beautiful and everything seem priceless. For Arthur Finch, the ambient glow felt less like an embrace and more like the lighting of a stage. And on this stage, he was playing the lead role, the besotted billionaire fiancée. Across the table, Serafina Monet was every bit the leading lady. Her gown, a shimmer of midnight blue silk, clung to her frame. Diamonds, a pre-wedding gift from Arthur, cascaded from her ears and throat, catching the light with every delicate turn of her head. She was, by any measure, perfect. Her laughter was a precisely tuned melody, her stories were captivating, and her eyes, the color of warm whiskey, held a depth that promised a world of devotion. It was a promise Arthur had appeared to buy completely. Arthur Finch, however, had not amassed a $12 billion fortune by being a fool. He had built his tech empire, Nexus Dynamics, on a foundation of unforgiving logic and an almost preternatural ability to see the man behind the curtain. He saw the world as a series of systems and people as variables within them. Yet in the realm of the heart, a system he had never mastered, he had allowed himself to hope for the fairy tale. The man with everything finds the one woman who sees the man, not his balance sheet. Serafina had played her part flawlessly from the moment she appeared at a charity gala, a vision of old money elegance who spoke of Rilke and Rothko, not stocks and acquisitions. She claimed a quiet, privileged upbringing in a Swiss boarding school, the orphaned daughter of a reclusive European diplomat. Her backstory was just vague enough to be uncheckable and just romantic enough to be alluring. She professed a charming indifference to his wealth, preferring quiet nights at his Long Island estate to the flashbulbs of the public eye. It was a masterful performance, but lately small inconsistencies had begun to prickle at the edge of Arthur's perception. A slip of the tongue during a wine tasting, where she used a bit of slang too coarse for a diplomat's daughter. A flicker of cold calculation in her eyes when she thought he wasn't looking, usually while reviewing the prenuptial agreement her lawyers were glossing over. The document was a labyrinth of clauses designed to grant her a staggering settlement in the event of a divorce, no matter the cause. It was designed for a quick, profitable exit. He dismissed his concerns as the cynicism of a man who'd been burned before. He was 45, and his life was littered with the wreckage of relationships with women who saw him as a walking vault. Serafina was supposed to be different. "Darling," she said, her silken voice pulling him from his thoughts. She reached across the table, her slender fingers tracing the back of his hand. Her touch felt like a brand, a claim. "You seem a million miles away. Is everything all right?" Arthur manufactured a smile, a skill perfected in hostile boardrooms. "Just some server farm issues in Singapore. Nothing for you to worry about." He squeezed her hand. "Tonight is about us." "It should always be about us," she purred, leaning forward slightly, a calculated move. "Only a few more weeks until I'm Mrs. Finch. Can you believe it?" "The days are crawling by," he replied, the lie tasting like ash. In that moment, he felt a profound and suffocating loneliness. He was encased in a gilded cage of his own making. The sommelier arrived with a 1982 Waitress he hadn't ordered, but knew Serafina adored. As the ruby-red liquid was poured, Arthur watched her. He saw the slight, almost imperceptible curl of satisfaction on her lips. It wasn't the look of a connoisseur. It was the look of a predator pleased with her bait. The first course arrived, and the conversation drifted through meaningless pleasantries. The wedding guest list, the honeymoon, the penthouse renovations. Arthur felt like an actor improvising a scene he no longer understood, his unease growing into a cold knot in his stomach. His gaze swept the room, cataloging the usual power players. And then he saw the staff, the invisible gears of the luxury machine, their faces impassive. No one ever looked at them. No one ever saw them. But as a young waitress with dark, worried eyes approached their table, Arthur felt a strange shift in the atmosphere, a ripple in the fabric of the evening's performance. The entire production was about to be thrown into chaos by a single, terrifying whisper. The waitress moved with a practiced economy of motion that spoke of long hours and aching feet. Her uniform was a simple, tailored black dress, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. She was young, maybe early 20s, with a weary seriousness that suggested a life lived beyond her years. Her name tag, pinned neatly, read Maya. In a room full of brightly colored peacocks, she was a sparrow, plain and unnoticeable. It was this invisibility that made her the perfect messenger. She approached table 12, her tray holding a single cocktail, Arthur's usual old-fashioned. The crystal glass was heavy, the ice a perfect, clear sphere. Serafina was in the middle of a charming story about a florist, completely absorbed in her own performance. Arthur smiled and nodded, playing his part, but his focus had narrowed entirely onto the approaching waitress. It was a pure, unadulterated instinct, the same gut feeling that guided his biggest business triumphs, a primal sense of wrongness. Maya placed the old-fashioned directly in front of him. Her eyes, large and dark brown, met his for a fraction of a second. They were not the deferential, blank eyes of a server. They were wide with a terrifying cocktail of fear and desperate urgency. It was a look that screamed. As she leaned in to position the glass, her body momentarily shielded her mouth from Serafina's line of sight. The ambient noise of the restaurant, the clatter of cutlery, the hum of conversations, the soft jazz, was a perfect cloak of sound. Her whisper was so faint it was little more than a breath of warm air, a vibration against his skin that was more felt than heard. "There's a drug in your drink." And just like that, she was gone. She straightened up, her face once again a mask of professional neutrality. "Enjoy, sir," she said in a normal, polite volume, as if she had delivered a simple beverage and not a life-altering warning. She turned and retreated, disappearing back into the dining room. The world seemed to slow, the sound dropping out as if he were underwater. The blood pounded in Arthur's ears. He stared at the glass. It looked identical to 1,000 others, but it was a weapon. "There's a drug in your drink." The words echoed in the sudden, silent cavern of his mind. His first instinct was a surge of violent, white-hot anger. He wanted to stand up, to smash the glass, to grab Serafina and demand the truth. But that would be a fatal mistake. He was a chess player. Reaction was weakness. Strategy was strength. He forced his muscles to relax, taking a slow, deliberate breath. He could not, under any circumstances, let her know the plot had been compromised. He needed to understand the game before he could win it. "And the florist said he could only get magenta," Serafina finished, laughing her perfect laugh. She looked at him, her smile faltering slightly. "Arthur, you're doing it again." He had to respond, to act normal. He blinked, forcing his focus back to her face. He saw her beauty, but now he saw the cracks in the porcelain. He saw the predator watching her prey. "I'm sorry, my love," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "The Singapore deal is more complex than I let on." He gestured towards the cocktail. "This should help me unwind." He reached for the glass. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw her watch his hand. He saw the slight tensing of her shoulders, a brief flicker of her gaze from his eyes to his hand and back again. It was anticipation. It was a hunter's stillness before the pounce. And in that infinitesimal moment, Arthur Finch knew with absolute, chilling certainty that the waitress was telling the truth. His fiancée, the woman he was about to give his name and his future, had just tried to poison him. The gilded cage had just revealed its deadly bars. The world was now a chessboard, and Arthur was the king under direct attack. Every move had to be precise. One misstep, one flicker of suspicion, and the game was over. He held the cool, heavy glass, a vessel of betrayal. His mind, honed by decades of corporate warfare, kicked into overdrive. He couldn't drink it. He couldn't refuse it. He needed a moment of misdirection to neutralize the threat. "To us," he said, raising the glass, his voice perfectly steady. "To a future that is brighter than either of us can imagine." Serafina smiled, a radiant, triumphant expression that sent a sliver of ice down his spine. She raised her own glass of champagne. "To us," she echoed, her eyes locked on his, waiting for him to drink. He brought the glass to his lips. The scent of bitters and treachery filled his nostrils. He tilted it, letting the cold rim touch his lips, but didn't drink. Using a bar trick from his youth, he let a tiny amount of the liquid into his mouth, holding it under his tongue without swallowing, while appearing to take a substantial gulp. The taste was acrid and chemical beneath the sweetness. He lowered the glass with a satisfying clink. "Ah," he said, feigning contentment. "They make a perfect one here." The tension in Serafina's shoulders eased almost imperceptibly. The first move was his. Now for disposal. The drugged cocktail couldn't just sit there. He needed a distraction, something so captivating it would draw her entire focus. "You know," he began, leaning forward conspiratorially, "I've been thinking about the penthouse terrace. I have an idea. It's a bit extravagant." Her eyes lit up instantly. "Extravagant? Darling, nothing is too extravagant for us. Tell me everything." "A retractable glass roof," he said, his voice full of feigned enthusiasm. "Imagine it. We could sit out there in the middle of winter, under the stars, perfectly warm." As he spoke, he used his hands to gesture, to paint a picture in the air. Serafina's focus was entirely on the vision of opulent comfort he was creating. It was the perfect misdirection. His left hand gestured grandly while his right, in one swift, fluid motion, picked up his water glass. As his left hand created the visual screen, his right hand silently poured the majority of the drugged old-fashioned into the condensation-slicked ice bucket beside the wine. The soft splash was masked by the restaurant's din. He then placed the now almost empty old-fashioned glass down, and in the same motion, set the water glass where the cocktail had been. The entire switch took less than 3 seconds. "A private observatory just for you," he finished, leaning back. He picked up the water glass, now masquerading as his cocktail, and took a long, deep drink. It was the most satisfying drink he'd ever had. Serafina was beaming, completely captivated. "Arthur, that's utterly brilliant." She hadn't noticed a thing. She saw only a besotted fool. The remainder of the meal was a masterclass in psychological warfare. Arthur was charming and effusive, lulling her into a false sense of absolute security. Inside, a storm of ice-cold fury was gathering. He observed her every move, every subtle glance at his now empty glass. He was no longer looking at a woman. He was looking at a specimen to be dissected. As the waiter cleared their main course, Arthur feigned a wave of dizziness. "Whoa," he said, pressing his fingers to his temple. "I think that cocktail went right to my head." A flicker of triumph crossed Serafina's face. "Are you all right, darling?" "I'm fine," he said, forcing a sluggish smile. "Just feeling very relaxed. Maybe we should skip dessert and head home." He needed to get out, to take control. "Of course," she said, her voice laced with a honeyed concern that now sounded grotesque. "I'll have my driver deal with the check," he said, pulling out his phone. He made a show of sending a text. It wasn't to his driver. It was to Gideon Vance, his formidable head of security. The text was short. Code black. The Crimson Sparrow. Now. Secure package from table 12. Utmost discretion. He stood up, a little unsteadily on purpose, and held out his hand. Serafina took it, believing she was leading a compliant lamb to the slaughter. She had no idea she was being led into a trap designed by a man who had just woken from a very dangerous dream. The ride back to Arthur's penthouse in the silent, climate-controlled Rolls-Royce was thick with a tension only he could feel. He leaned his head against the cool leather, feigning drowsiness to give himself time to think. The controlled rage from the restaurant was now solidifying into a diamond-hard resolve. This was no longer just a betrayal, it was a declaration of war. Serafina sat beside him, a study in poised victory. He could feel her watching him. She occasionally placed a gentle hand on his arm, a gesture that felt like a jailer checking his prisoner's shackles. Just relax, darling. We'll be home soon. Her soothing tone sounded like the hiss of a snake. He wondered what her endgame was. A robbery? An accidental overdose? A tragic fall from the balcony? The possibilities were chilling, but he felt no fear, only a cold need for answers. As the car swept into the private underground garage, Arthur continued the performance, leaning heavily on his driver. "Long day," he mumbled for Serafina's benefit. "Let's get you upstairs," she said, taking his other arm. They guided him into the private elevator. The ascent, usually a moment of quiet awe, felt like a descent into the belly of the beast. Inside the sprawling apartment, with its glittering views of Central Park, Arthur stumbled toward the master suite. "Need to lie down," he slurred. "I'll be right here," Serafina said, her voice dripping with counterfeit care. The moment the bedroom door clicked shut, the act fell away. Arthur stood perfectly still, his body thrumming with adrenaline. His personal encrypted phone buzzed silently in his pocket. A message from Gideon Vance. Package secured. Liquid and ice melt being transported to lab. Preliminary visual. Non-dissolvable sediment. Will have full analysis by Euro 300. Standing by, Arthur's fingers flew across the screen. Good. Phase 2. I want everything on Serafina Monet. The name is likely an alias. Her story is Swiss diplomat's orphan daughter. Find the truth. Use all resources, no limits. Dig until you hit bedrock. And Gideon, be a ghost. A one-word reply came back instantly. Done. Arthur knew what that meant. Gideon Vance, a man of terrifying efficiency and a past in the Mossad, would dismantle the facade of Serafina Monet by morning. Now Arthur turned his attention to the immediate situation. From a hidden panel, he activated the apartment's internal surveillance cameras. He watched the monitor. Serafina was in the main living area, not getting him water, but pacing anxiously on her phone. She spoke in low, urgent tones. After she hung up, she walked to his study and tried the handle. Locked. A flicker of frustration crossed her face. So robbery was part of the plan. The drug must be for manipulation, to force him to open the safe himself. He watched her for another 20 minutes. She paced. She checked her phone. She stared out the window. She was waiting for the drug to take its full effect. She was about to be very disappointed. Arthur lay down on the bed, mussing his hair and beginning the slow, rhythmic breathing of a deep, drugged sleep. The stage was set. Hours crept by. Arthur didn't sleep. He lay there, a statue of dormant fury. At 3:17 a.m., his phone buzzed again. It was Gideon. Analysis complete. Cocktail contained a potent benzodiazepine derivative, 4x standard dose. Causes sedation, amnesia, extreme suggestibility. Also traces of scopolamine, classic devil's breath. Not meant to kill, meant to erase and control. She was trying to make you an ATM. A second message followed. Got a hit on facial recognition from a Monte Carlo casino security file. Name flagged was not Serafina Monet. It was Anya Petrova, known associate of a grifter named Roman Petrov. They run honey traps on wealthy businessmen in Europe. The pattern is identical. He handles logistics, she plays the part. They milk the victim and vanish. Looks like they went for the big leagues. More to come. The thread is unraveling. Anya Petrova. The name felt alien, yet more real than the one he knew. Behind his bedroom door was not an elegant orphan, but a common criminal who had grievously misjudged her prey. Arthur Finch was no longer the victim. He was the hunter. Dawn broke over Manhattan. In the encrypted data center that served as Gideon Vance's nerve center, the ghost of Serafina Monet was being dragged into the light. Gideon operated with the precision of a surgeon, seeing data points and vulnerabilities, not people. The name Anya Petrova was the key that unraveled the entire tapestry of lies. Gideon's team quickly confirmed that Serafina's flawless documents were high-grade forgeries, traced to a batch stolen from a Belgian consulate. The payment for the forgeries was tracked through a maze of cryptocurrency transactions back to a closed account that had received a large wire transfer from a recently divorced German industrialist, one of Anya and Roman's previous victims. A clear pattern was emerging, a blueprint of their greed. Next, Gideon erased her fictional past. The Swiss boarding school and diplomat father evaporated. Instead, by cross-referencing facial recognition with social databases in Eastern Europe, he found the truth. Anya Petrova, born in a bleak industrial town outside Volgograd, Russia. Her father was a factory foreman with a gambling problem. She was a brilliant student of languages and drama who vanished at 18, lured away by the charismatic, ruthless Roman Petrov. He had spotted her potential and molded her into his perfect instrument. He was the director. She was the star. Gideon's team built a timeline of their cons, from petty thefts in Prague to a multi-million-euro art fund scam in Germany. The most damning evidence, however, came from the hacked server of a burner phone company favored by criminals. Gideon retrieved a year's worth of deleted text messages between two numbers, a logbook of their conspiracy against Arthur, written in Russian. Roman, the fish is on the hook. He is completely enchanted. The prenup is a masterpiece. Anya, he is more observant than the others. I see him watching me. We must be careful. Roman, don't be paranoid. He is a man. Stick to the plan. The engagement party is the deadline. We need him compliant by then to sign the final transfer authorization for the Charity Foundation. The Charity Foundation was their exit strategy. A shell corporation in Panama set up to receive a $50 million donation from one of Arthur's holding companies, authorized by a drugged Arthur. The texts from the last 24 hours were the final nail in the coffin. Roman, is it done? Did he take the drink? Anya, yes. He drank it all. He is upstairs now. Sleeping. Roman, be calm. The drug is potent. He will be like a child. Get him to his study first thing. The transfer needs his voice command and thumbprint. I will be at the rendezvous point at 0900. Roman, stop worrying. Tomorrow you are not Anya Petrova. You are a wealthy woman. We will be in Rio before he even knows he's been robbed. Gideon compiled everything into a single encrypted file, forged documents, bank records, timelines, photos, and the full text transcripts. He titled it Project Nightingale and sent it to Arthur's secure device. In the silent penthouse, Arthur read the file. He saw Roman's cruel face. He read Anya's words. He saw the whole sordid, pathetic plan laid bare. The $50 million heist was so uninspired. He wasn't even angry anymore. He was disappointed. He looked at the bedroom door. Behind it, Anya Petrova waited for her drugged puppet to wake up. She had no idea the man in the bed was wide awake, holding a dossier that contained her entire life. She thought she was directing the final act. She had no idea Arthur Finch was rewriting the script. 2 days later, Arthur Finch walked into the Morning Star, a small diner in Queens that was a universe away from the Crimson Sparrow. He spotted her immediately, Maya Rodriguez. Without the severe uniform, she looked even younger, wearing jeans and a faded t-shirt, her hair in a loose ponytail. She was refilling salt shakers. He slid onto a stool. She approached with a coffee pot, not recognizing him. "What can I get for you?" "Just coffee," he said. "In a few minutes of your time. My name is Arthur Finch." Her hand froze. Recognition dawned, followed by fear. She glanced around the nearly empty diner. "What are you doing here? Is everything okay?" "Everything is under control, thanks to you," Arthur said quietly. "I came to ask you 2 questions. How did you know? And why did you help me?" She hesitated. "Look, I don't want any trouble." "You won't have any," Arthur assured her. "I will see to it you are protected and compensated, but I need to understand." After a long moment, she nodded. "My break is in 10 minutes, back corner booth." 10 minutes later, she slid into the booth opposite him. "Her name isn't Serafina," she began, staring into her coffee mug. "It's Anya. The man she works with is Roman. They're con artists." "How do you know them?" Arthur asked gently. A shadow of old pain crossed her face. "They ruined my family," she said. 5 years ago in Chicago. My father owned a small construction business. He worked his whole life to build it." She took a shaky breath. "He was a widower. Lonely. Then this beautiful woman, Helena back then, came into his life. It was her. Same face. She made him feel seen. For a man who hadn't been listened to in a long time, it was like a drug all on its own. She made him feel like a king. And Roman? He was Hans, her brilliant business partner, Maya continued with a bitter twist of her lips. They sold my father on a fake investment, eco-friendly building materials. They had forged patents, faked reports, a whole website. My dad wasn't a fool, but they were good. Roman was the numbers guy, Anya, Helena, was the heart. She convinced him it was their future. He invested everything, she said, her voice cracking. His business, his savings, a second mortgage on our house, over $500,000. It was everything we had. And they disappeared, Arthur stated. Maya nodded, wiping at an eye. The day the money cleared, the business collapsed. We lost the house. The stress, it broke him. My father had a massive stroke a year later, a direct result of the financial and emotional stress, the doctor said. He's in a state care facility now. He can't speak. Arthur felt a cold fury on her behalf that eclipsed his own. His $50 million was just money. These people had stolen a man's life. We went to the police, Maya continued, but there was nothing they could do. The money was gone. The names were fake. We moved to New York to start over. I took these jobs to pay for my father's care. When I saw her walk into the Crimson Sparrow on your arm, wearing those diamonds, I knew she was doing it again. I saw the bartender slip something into your drink on her signal. I had to do something. I couldn't let them destroy someone else for my dad. This wasn't a random act of kindness. It was profound courage, born from grief. This young woman had risked everything because it was the right thing to do. Arthur slid an envelope across the table. Maya shook her head. No, I didn't do it for money. I know, Arthur said. That's why you deserve it. Consider it a down payment on the justice your father is owed. I also read you were studying to be a chef before you had to drop out. Maya stared at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. What are you going to do? She whispered. Arthur's face hardened. They wanted a performance, he said. They wanted a grand finale. Well, they're going to get one. But the ending has been changed, and you, Maya, are going to have a front row seat. The following week was a blur of calculated deception. To Anya, Arthur was the perfect victim, attributing his feigned grogginess and memory lapses to stress. He claimed his doctor had advised him to lay off alcohol, cleverly preventing any further drugging attempts. Anya, brimming with confidence, played the doting fiancée, constantly reminding him of the upcoming $50 million transfer to their charitable foundation. Don't forget the meeting with the foundation managers the day after the engagement party, she would say sweetly. Of course, my love, Arthur would reply, mentally reviewing the asset seizure warrants Gideon was preparing with the DA's office. The engagement party was to be the stage for her downfall. Arthur threw himself into the planning with a fervor that delighted Anya. The event at his Long Island estate was to be extravagantly opulent. A massive marquee on the lawn, a Michelin-starred chef, a full orchestra. Anya saw it as her coronation, the final spectacle before she and Roman vanished with the cash. She had no idea that every detail was a carefully placed brick in the wall of her prison. Gideon worked in the shadows, orchestrating the trap. The bartender from the Crimson Sparrow, a low-level criminal named Leo, quickly confessed and agreed to cooperate. Gideon then contacted Anya and Roman's past victims, a German industrialist still stinging from his loss, and a French art dealer were hungry for revenge. Gideon flew them to New York and recorded their stark video testimonies. The final special guest was Maya Rodriguez. She started this, Arthur told Gideon. She deserves to see how it ends. Meanwhile, Roman Petrov grew cocky. The plan seemed flawless. He finalized their escape route, a private jet from a small New Jersey airport. He was already mentally spending the money, oblivious to the surveillance van parked outside his Brooklyn apartment. The day of the party arrived. The estate was a picture of perfection. Guests in black tie and designer gowns mingled on the lawn. Anya, in a shimmering gold gown, was the center of it all, radiating triumph. She felt invincible. Arthur stood beside her, playing the adoring fiancé, but his eyes were cold and watchful. He saw Gideon moving silently through the crowd, saw plainclothes security blended with the staff, and saw federal agents posing as guests near the exits. "Are you happy, my love?" he asked her. I've never been happier, she breathed. It's all so perfect. I'm glad, Arthur said softly, because a night like this is something you should remember for the rest of your life. As the orchestra finished its set, Arthur walked onto the stage. A hush fell over the crowd. Anya looked up at him, her face glowing. This was her moment. Arthur tapped the microphone. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. I wanted to take this moment to say a few words about my fiancée, the woman you know as Serafina Monet. He paused, his expression hardening. The trap was about to spring. The orchestra's final note hung in the air, a perfect, shimmering chord that seemed to bless the union of Arthur Finch and his beautiful fiancée. Anya Petrova, playing the role of Serafina Monet for the last time, felt a surge of pure, unadulterated triumph. She sat at the head table, the queen of this opulent world, bathed in the adoring light of 100 candles and the envious gazes of the city's most powerful people. The gold of her gown felt like a second skin, the 10-carat diamond on her finger a heavy, thrilling promise of the life that was now irrevocably hers. In less than 48 hours, she and Roman would be ghosts, their new identities and $50 million their reward for this masterfully executed performance. She caught Arthur's eye as he rose from the table, and she gave him a radiant smile, a final, perfect brushstroke on her masterpiece. Are you ready for this, my love? He had asked her moments before, his voice a low murmur against the backdrop of chatter. I feel like I've been ready my whole life, she had replied. And in that moment, she had never spoken a truer word. Arthur walked onto the small stage at the front of the marquee, the spotlight following him. A hush fell over the crowd, a wave of expectant silence rolling through the vast tent. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. The public declaration, the heartfelt toast from the famously private billionaire to the enchanting woman who had finally captured his heart. Anya leaned forward, her expression a perfect mask of loving adoration, ready to drink in every word of her victory. Arthur tapped the microphone, the soft sound echoing in the stillness. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming to celebrate with us. His voice was warm, steady, carrying a note of profound contentment. He looked directly at Anya, a soft smile playing on his lips. I wanted to take this moment to say a few words about my fiancée, about Serafina. He let the name hang in the air, caressing it. We live our lives by the stories we tell ourselves, stories of who we are, where we come from, and what we deserve. And every so often, if we are very, very lucky, we encounter a story so captivating, so beautifully rendered, that we want nothing more than to make it our own. The story of Serafina Monet is the most captivating I have ever heard. Anya felt a tear of genuine emotion prick her eye. He truly was a poet, a fool, and she had played him perfectly. Her story, Arthur continued, his voice weaving a spell over the audience, is one of grace in the face of loss, of a quiet dignity that is so rare in our loud, chaotic world. A woman of impeccable breeding, of effortless elegance, who can discuss philosophy as easily as she can charm a room. She is, in every way, a masterpiece. He raised his glass as if to toast. And like any great work of art, her story is filled with layers, with hidden depths, with a complexity that demands closer inspection. He lowered his glass without drinking. The smile on his face tightened, losing all its warmth. The atmosphere shifted, a sudden, inexplicable chill cutting through the warmth of the marquee. For instance, Arthur said, his voice dropping, becoming hard and precise, the beautiful thing about a truly great story is that it often has a surprising origin, an unexpected beginning. Serafina's story, we are told, began in a Swiss chalet in the loving care of a distinguished diplomat, but the truth is always more interesting than fiction. He paused, his eyes boring into Anya's. Her story actually begins in a bleak industrial town outside of Volgograd, Russia, and her name at the start of this story was not Serafina Monet. His voice rang out, clear and cold. Her name is Anya Petrova. A collective gasp, sharp and sudden, went through the marquee. On the massive screen that had been discreetly erected behind the stage, an image appeared, a grainy black and white photograph of a stern-looking young girl with familiar, haunted eyes, standing in front of a crumbling, Soviet-era apartment block. It was unmistakably a younger Anya. Her face went pale, a sickly, chalky white beneath her expensive makeup. The wineglass trembled in her hand. "Arthur, what is this?" she stammered, the words catching in her throat, a choked whisper that was lost in the rising murmur of the crowd. "What are you doing?" Her eyes darted around the room, searching for a friendly face, an anchor in the suddenly churning sea. She found only 100 pairs of eyes, once adoring, now staring at her with a mixture of confusion and dawning suspicion. The mask of Serafina Monet was cracking. "I'm telling the truth," Arthur said, his voice unyielding, "because another key element of a great story is a compelling cast of supporting characters." The image on the screen changed. It was now a clear surveillance photo of a handsome, cruel-faced man, Roman Petrov. "This is Anya's partner in crime, Roman Petrov. Together, they are not connoisseurs of art, but artists of the con. They specialize in a particularly vile form of theater known as a honey trap. Anya, under various aliases, plays the part of the perfect woman. She finds a man's weaknesses, his loneliness, his vanity, and she exploits them. Then Roman enters, and together they strip their victims of their fortunes." Arthur's eyes scanned the crowd. Roman had a particularly insightful view on their work. He once wrote to Anya in a text message, regarding me, "Don't be paranoid. He is a man. He sees a beautiful woman and his brain turns to soup." A wave of uncomfortable shifting went through the male guests. The humiliation was surgical. The screen split, showing images of a grim-faced German industrialist and an emotional French art dealer. Then, video began to play. "My name is Klaus Richter," the German said, his voice heavy with remembered pain. "The woman I knew as Helena stole 2 million euros from me and my children." The French dealer wept openly. "She and her partner, Hans, took everything. Not just my money, but a Degas sketch that had been in my family for a century. They steal your trust, and then they steal your soul." The camera work was professional, unflinching. For every testimony, the screen would cut to a close-up of Anya's face, forcing her to watch the ghosts of her past rise up to condemn her. She had shrunk in her chair, the golden gown now looking like a garish costume. "Their ambitions grew," Arthur continued, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "They decided to aim for the big leagues." He held up a small, sealed evidence bag containing the remnants of his drugged old-fashioned. "Their plan for me was more direct. Last week, Anya drugged my drink." The full toxicology report flashed on the screen, the clinical terms, benzodiazepine, scopolamine, chemical incapacitation, glowing in the evening light. The goal was to render me a compliant puppet, to make me sign over $50 million the day after this very party. After which, a private jet was waiting to fly them to Rio. He let that sink in. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of the crime stunned the assembled elite into absolute silence. This wasn't a story from a novel. It was a cold, hard plot that had nearly succeeded in their very midst. "It was a brilliant plan," Arthur conceded with a thin, cruel smile. "Flawlessly executed, and it would have worked, except for one small detail they couldn't possibly account for. One variable in the system they did not see. The thing about telling lies in a world full of people is that you never know who is listening. You never know who you have wronged before, and you never know when your past is serving the drinks." He paused and turned toward the side of the stage. "They were seen by a woman of true character, a woman with more integrity in her little finger than this fraud has in her entire body." From the shadows, a nervous but resolute Maya Rodriguez stepped into the spotlight. She was dressed simply but elegantly in a dark blue dress. She looked terrified, but as she looked directly at Anya, her fear was burned away by a 5-year-old fire. "This is Maya Rodriguez," Arthur announced. "She was our waitress that night, and she is the reason I am standing here tonight. But Maya's story with Anya and Roman started long before mine." Prompted gently by Arthur, Maya stepped to the microphone. Her voice, though trembling slightly at first, grew strong and clear. "The woman you know as Serafina, I knew as Helena," she began. She told the story of her father, of his small business, of his loneliness. She didn't speak with melodrama, but with a quiet, devastating grief that was more powerful than any shouting could be. "They didn't just take his money. They took his pride. They took his future. They took the light from his eyes. He is alive, but they killed my father." As she spoke, the last vestiges of Anya's composure crumbled. The mask of Serafina Monet shattered into a million pieces, revealing the desperate, cornered criminal beneath. She buried her face in her hands, her body shaking with silent, racking sobs. It was not a plea for sympathy. It was the sound of absolute, irrevocable defeat. "As for Anya's accomplices," Arthur said, his voice ringing with finality, "the bartender has been cooperating with the authorities for a week." The screen showed the man's signed confession. And her partner, the great director of this little play, Roman Petrov. Arthur looked towards the main entrance of the marquee. On cue, the white drapes of the entrance parted. 2 FBI agents walked through, flanking a man in handcuffs. It was Roman. He had been picked up at his apartment an hour earlier, just as he was packing his bag for Rio. His handsome face was a mask of disbelief and fury. His eyes found Anya's, and in them, there was no love, no concern, only cold, reptilian hatred for her failure. "Anya Petrova," Arthur said, his voice dropping as more agents moved quietly through the crowd and approached her table. "You crave wealth and status, but you don't understand that things of true value cannot be stolen. They must be earned. Trust, respect, honor. You have earned nothing." The agents helped her to her feet, her golden dress a mockery of her situation. The sound of the handcuffs clicking shut was shockingly loud in the dead silence of the marquee. The 10-carat diamond on her finger caught the light, a final, ironic glint from a world she had tried to steal, but would now never possess. The grand finale was over. The performance had ended. The moment the FBI agents escorted a handcuffed Anya Petrova out of the marquee, the stunned silence of the guests shattered like a crystal glass dropped on marble. The aftermath was not a quiet, orderly affair. It was an implosion of a carefully constructed reality. The air, once filled with the strains of a classical orchestra and polite laughter, was now thick with a cacophony of frantic whispers, gasps, and the urgent, tapping thumbs of the city's elite, broadcasting the scandal to the world in real time. The scent of champagne and expensive perfume was suddenly tainted with the acrid smell of chaos. Arthur Finch remained on the stage, a statue of calm amidst the maelstrom he had unleashed. He watched as police cars, their flashing red and blue lights slicing through the elegant evening darkness, swept up the long, manicured driveway of his estate. He had, in effect, turned his own engagement party into a crime scene. Gideon Vance materialized at his side, his face impassive, speaking quietly into his wrist. "Perimeter is secure. We are coordinating with the lead federal agent. All key subjects are in custody." Arthur gave a single, sharp nod. His gaze swept over the crowd. He saw faces painted with a mixture of horror, morbid fascination, and in some a hint of schadenfreude. They had come for a society party and had been given a public execution. He knew that by morning, he would be the subject of every gossip column, his judgment dissected on every news channel. He had exposed Anya, but in doing so, he had exposed his own vulnerability. He felt a strange detachment from it all, the cold clarity of a man who has just survived a near-fatal crash. Meanwhile, on the other side of the estate, Maya Rodriguez was being quietly guided through a side exit by one of Gideon's plainclothes security staff, a kind-faced woman who wrapped a cashmere blanket around her shoulders. The night air was cool against her flushed cheeks. She could still hear the rising din from the marquee, the wail of distant sirens growing closer. It all felt surreal, like a dream from which she was struggling to wake. She had spent 5 years consumed by a cold, simmering rage over the injustice done to her family. She had dreamed of a moment of reckoning, but she had never imagined it would be like this. A spectacle of immense wealth and public humiliation under the stars of Long Island. She felt not triumph, but a profound bone-deep exhaustion, followed by the slow dawning realization that it was finally truly over. The ghosts of Helena and Hans had been exorcised. The following weeks were a media tsunami. The story was simply too perfect to resist. Headlines screamed from every newsstand. Finch's fiancée, a fraud. The billionaire bride-to-be was a Russian grifter. The New York Post ran a full-page photo of a weeping Anya in her golden gown with the simple, brutal headline, "The Gold Digger." Talk shows convened panels of psychologists to analyze Arthur's savior complex and Anya's sociopathic charm. The narrative quickly solidified. The brilliant but lonely billionaire, the predatory foreign beauty, and the heroic working-class waitress who brought the whole charade crashing down. Arthur, true to his nature, refused to participate in the circus. He instructed his formidable PR team to issue a single, terse statement. Mr. Finch has been the target of a significant criminal conspiracy, which is now being handled by the appropriate federal authorities. He is grateful for the outpouring of support, but will be making no further comment on this private matter. He then retreated into a cocoon of silence, cutting off all but his most essential business contacts. He watched the news reports of Anya and Roman's perp walks, the televised ritual of shamed criminals being paraded before the cameras. Roman, defiant and sneering. Anya, a shell of her former self, hiding her face, her once glamorous features now pale and drawn. He felt nothing for them, not pity, not even hatred. They were simply a bad investment he had finally written off. The legal process was swift and brutal. Faced with an avalanche of evidence, Gideon's pristine digital forensics, the bartender's full confession, and the damning video testimonies from their European victims, their defense attorneys saw no path to acquittal. Roman, in a final act of self-preservation, attempted to betray Anya, claiming he was merely a pawn in her master plan. But the text messages proved he was the director, the handler. Anya, stripped of her aliases and her confidence, offered no resistance. Arthur was advised by his lawyers that he would not need to testify, but he chose to attend their sentencing hearing. He sat in the back of the sterile, wood-paneled courtroom, unnoticed by the press. He watched as Anya Petrova, dressed in an ill-fitting prison jumpsuit, was led to the defendant's table. There was no trace of Serafina Monet left. This was the girl from the bleak photograph, the factory foreman's daughter, a woman whose prodigious talents for performance had led her only to this drab, hopeless room. For the first time, Arthur felt a flicker of something complex, a profound sadness for the waste of it all, and a quiet anger at himself for being so easily beguiled by a story he desperately wanted to be true. He had not been blinded by love, he realized, but by his own vanity. The judge was unsparing. Roman Petrov was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Anya Petrova, due to her eventual cooperation, received 10. As she was led away, her eyes briefly met Arthur's. There was no defiance in them, no anger, only a hollow, empty recognition. The final curtain had fallen. For Maya, life had changed in ways she was still struggling to process. The day after the party, she had quit both of her jobs, walking away from the diner and the high-end restaurant with a sense of dizzying liberation. Arthur's initial gift had been enough to remove her immediate financial burdens, but a week later, a package arrived by courier from Arthur's family office. Inside were documents establishing a multi-million-dollar trust in her name, with a secondary, irrevocable trust to fund the highest level of care for her father for the rest of his life. She sat in her small apartment, the legal papers spread across her kitchen table, and wept. They were not tears of joy, but of release. It was the sound of 5 years of accumulated fear, stress, and grief finally leaving her body. The next day, she went to the state care facility. She sat beside her father, who stared blankly at the television. She held his hand, which was limp and cool in hers, and she told him everything. She told him about Anya and Roman, about the diamonds and the lies, about the whisper in the restaurant and the party on Long Island. She told him that the people who had hurt him were gone, that they could never hurt anyone again. "It's over, Dad," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You can rest now. We're safe." He gave no sign that he had heard, but as she left, she felt a peace she hadn't known since she was a child. A month later, Arthur called her. He didn't ask her to his penthouse or a fancy office. He asked her to meet him on a street corner in a charming, tree-lined neighborhood in Brooklyn. He stood in front of a small, vacant storefront with a dusty "For Lease" sign in the window. "I have a proposition," he said, his tone more that of a business partner than a benefactor. He handed her a folder. Inside was the lease for the property, paid in full for 5 years, and the incorporation papers for a new business. with her named as the sole proprietor. Also inside was a detailed business plan and a substantial pre-approved line of credit. This is not a gift, Maya. It's an investment. I've learned the hard way to stop investing in pretty stories and start investing in people of character. I believe you have character in spades, and I've been told you're a hell of a cook. 6 months later, the Morning Star, named in honor of the diner where her new life began, opened its doors. It wasn't fancy or exclusive. It was warm, welcoming, and infused with Maya's spirit. The food, a blend of her Latin heritage and the classic techniques she'd studied, was incredible. It was an instant, roaring success, celebrated for its authenticity in a city full of artifice. Arthur was a frequent customer. He never called ahead. He simply showed up and took whatever table was free, often table 12 by the window. He came not as a billionaire, but as a friend. One evening, long after the last of the customers had departed, Maya was doing inventory at the bar. The restaurant was quiet, filled with the satisfying hum of a kitchen being cleaned after a busy night. Arthur had stayed late, reading at his usual table. She poured 2 glasses of a fine Burgundy, a wine he had taught her to appreciate, and brought them to his table, sitting opposite him. "Long day?" he asked, smiling. "The best kind," she replied, her face tired but glowing with a sense of purpose. "We sold out of the short ribs again." They sat in a comfortable silence for a moment. "Have you ever thought about how strange it all is?" she asked quietly. A whispered sentence, and everything changes. For both of us. Arthur looked around the warm, bustling restaurant she had built from nothing. He looked at Maya, a woman whose integrity had saved him from his own foolishness. "I used to think my life was about building an empire," he said, his voice reflective. "Big, grand, impenetrable things. But what you've built here, it's real. It was born from honesty. I've learned that's the only foundation worth building on." He raised his glass. "The diamonds are gone, the lies are gone. This is what's left." Maya raised her glass to meet his. "To what's left," she said, her smile genuine and bright. "To new beginnings." They clinked their glasses together, the sound clear and true in the quiet room. Outside, the city of New York hummed with its endless stories of ambition and loss, of heartbreak and hope. But inside the Morning Star, 2 survivors of a strange and bitter storm had found a quiet harbor, bound not by romance or obligation, but by a shared, unbreakable truth. That sometimes the most valuable things in life are the ones that cannot be bought or sold, but are simply, bravely spoken aloud. In a world obsessed with appearances, this story is a stark reminder that the most dangerous lies are the ones we tell ourselves. Arthur Finch had everything money could buy, but he nearly lost it all by ignoring his own intuition. It was a single act of courage from an ordinary woman, Maya Rodriguez, that shattered the illusion and exposed the ugly truth hiding beneath a beautiful surface. Her bravery reminds us that integrity is not about wealth or status. It's about choosing to do the right thing, even when you're terrified. This wasn't just about a foiled crime. It was about the collision of 2 worlds, the power of a single voice to change everything, and the discovery that true wealth lies in trust, not treasure. If this story of deception and ultimate justice captivated you, please hit that like button, share it with someone who loves a good real-life drama, and be sure to subscribe to our channel for more unbelievable true stories you won't want to miss.